Many people may not understand why China's road to rejuvenation is so unstoppable. This actually involves a major question: what kind of industrialization path have we taken since the founding of the People's Republic of China, and why is it so difficult to copy the Chinese model? Today, we will sort out the context of China's Centennial Road in detail, so that everyone can have a clear backbone logic for the past, present, and future. Let's ask 3 questions first and let everyone think about them together for a few minutes. The first question is, why did the Communist Party win the world in the end when there were so many heroes competing in modern Chinese history? The second question is, why, as soon as the People's Republic of China was founded, overseas scholars responded one after another, even if they gave up generous treatment, they returned to a poor China to participate in its construction? This phenomenon did not appear when Sun Yat-sen established the Republic of China, nor did it appear during the Beiyang government, the national government, or even the national government after the victory of the anti-Japanese war. The third question is, why among all the developing countries in the world after World War II, only China has established a complete industrial system? The population size of Taiwan and South Korea is too small and can be ignored. The answer is simple, because the Chinese Communist Party proposed a feasible solution to save China. This solution inspired intellectuals of that era to sacrifice their youth and lives. Likewise, this solution is difficult to replicate in other developing countries. Let's talk about it briefly. Old China was poor and weak, and was slaughtered and bullied by foreign powers. The essential reason was that others had an industrial civilization and we had an agricultural civilization. The generational gap between civilizations meant that Chinese society could only be crushed by foreign powers. So how did China enter industrial civilization? Rely on the system? By culture? Rely on the efforts of the elite? We have tried all these. We killed the emperor and established a republic. The May 4th movement smashed the Confucian store and copied Western culture entirely. Since the Westernization movement, the Chinese elite has been working hard to build our own industry, with no results. All failed with one exception. So what is the plan proposed by the Chinese Communist Party? It's very simple: smash the existing social structure and get rid of China's rentier class. This is a seemingly radical and revolutionary plan, but it is the only way to save old China. Why? Quite simply, establishing an industrial system requires an astronomical amount of money and requires a first pot of gold investment. So, where does this first pot of gold come from? The European powers relied on external robbery. During the Age of Discovery, the European powers plundered huge wealth in the Americas, Africa, and Asia. This wealth was the first pot of gold for the European powers' industrial revolution. The United States relies on domestic plunder, including northern capitalists competing for the slaves of southern plantation slave owners, and at the same time using dumping of industrial products to rob the domestic commodity market. In the end, the conflicts were irreconcilable and the Civil War broke out, leaving half of the United States in ruins. Japan also relied on domestic plunder. During the Meiji Restoration, the tax burden on Japanese farmers was 4 times that of farmers under the Manchu Qing dynasty. The hardships of Japanese farmers at that time were unimaginable to ordinary people today. I have read a record that the average family at that time, if the son eats a little more food, he will be beaten up by his father or even driven out of the house. If this is not enough, Japanese farm girls are transported ship by ship to Nanyang to work as prostitutes, and the money earned from selling women's skin and flesh is used to earn foreign exchange for industry. Equipment. In the end, most of these farm girls became ghosts from a foreign land. At that time, China's social structure was roughly like this: imperial power did not go to the countryside, the grassroots government agencies only reached the county level, and the rural areas mainly relied on the autonomy of the gentry. The government mainly relied on officials and squires, landowners, to collect taxes from farmers, and had to endure exploitation by officials and squires. So, where will the first pot of gold come from if China wants to industrialize? There is no hope of going out to rob. It is difficult for the domestic government's tax revenue to maintain the operation of administrative agencies. The farmers also bear high land rent plus taxes, and their lives are also very difficult. What about the rentier class, landowners and urban compradors? Either they use loan sharks to exploit the last bit of land owned by farmers, or they buy Western goods for enjoyment, or they speculate in gold, government bonds, or commodities, or they simply bury their gold and silver treasures in the ground and become misers. If this kind of social structure is not broken, if you change the system, change the culture, and rely on a few elite industries to save the country, there will be no chance. Therefore, the National Salvation Plan proposed by the Communist Party of China at that time was the only feasible way to smash the existing social structure and get rid of China's rentier class. Use the interests of the rentier class to raise the first pot of gold for China's industrial revolution. Later, rural agrarian revolution and urban public-private partnership were all designed according to this idea. 30 years before the founding of the People's Republic of China, China not only eliminated the rentier class, but also basically eliminated the survival of the rentier class through repeated class struggle. At that time every grain of grain and every fruit was indeed saved to replace machinery and equipment. So, now you can understand why as soon as New China was founded, overseas scholars responded one after another, preferring to give up generous treatment abroad and return to a poor China to participate in construction. The reason is that the CCP's National Salvation Plan made the intellectual class see the poverty and weakness, the hope of the Chinese nation entering the industrial society. The intellectuals at that time still had a strong sense of nation and country. So, you can now understand why only China was able to establish a complete industrial system after World War II, and why the Chinese model is so difficult to copy. The reason is first of all the plan in the initial stage, later plans are also difficult to copy. The society that broke up the agricultural society structure, get rid of the rentier class, and raise the first pot of gold on the bones of the rentier class. Which country or political party organization can do this? Dare you do this? But smashing an old world and building a new one is easier said than done. For example, why did China become completely opposed to the United States after its founding? And then the decades of blockade by the Western world led by the United States? When the People's Liberation Army crossed the Yangtze River, the United States had completely abandoned the Kuomintang government. In April 1949, the People's Liberation Army captured Nanjing. Leighton Stewart, the U.S. ambassador to China, did not go south to Guangzhou with the nationalist government, but stayed there. What was Leighton doing in Nanjing? Don't you just want to contact the CCP? So why didn't the CCP leader at that time accept the olive branch of the United States and gain international recognition from the United States? Would future development be easier? It's not that simple. It is not impossible for the United States to recognize New China, but the premise is that you must respect the interests of the United States in China. This is the treatment that a semi-colonial country receives international recognition. When the Revolution of 1911 broke out in 1911, when Sun Yat-sen established the first Republican government in Nanjing, the first thing he did was to publicly declare that he completely respects the interests of the great powers in China, including recognizing the privileges and spheres of influence of the great powers in China, including inheriting the Manchu Qing dynasty and signing a series of unequal treaties with the great powers. Only in this way did it gain international recognition from the great powers. When the national government of the Republic of China was established in 1925, the first thing it did was to publicly declare that it respects the interests of the great powers in China, including recognizing the privileges and spheres of influence of the great powers in China, including inheriting the Manchu Qing dynasty and signing a series of unequal treaties with the great powers. Only in this way did it gain international recognition from the great powers. You know the Treaty of Zhengke, one of China's most humiliating treaties. The nationalist government held its nose and took it, and continued to pay reparations to the great powers, including Japan, until it stopped paying several years after the outbreak of the anti-Japanese war. At that time, if the CCP wanted to gain recognition from the United States, it had to inherit a series of treaties signed by the Kuomintang government and the United States. One of the more famous ones is the Treaty of Friendship, Commerce, and Navigation between China and the United States. What does this treaty mean? That is, people and companies from China and the United States can freely enter another country to travel, study, settle, and do business. Tariffs can be as low as only a few percentage points. Doesn't it seem fair? But what are the consequences of free friendly trade between the world's most powerful industrial country and a backward agricultural country? The nationalist government signed this treaty with the United States in November 1946, and then, a large number of American goods flooded into the Chinese market, from gasoline to cars, from electric lights to movies, from flour cloth to bale sugar, from lipstick stockings to ties and leather shoes, all of them are USA. Domestic private enterprises can hardly survive and can only close down one after another. Exports have dropped sharply, and foreign exchange reserves have dropped sharply. In just a few months, the national government's foreign deficit has reached $470 million US, almost emptying the national treasury. Then the legal currency plummeted like a cliff, and the national government's finances collapsed in October 1947. Yes, you read that right, the finance and economy are in total collapse. Why did Chiang Kai-shek's government collapse in just 3 years? This Sino-US Treaty of Friendship, Commerce, and Navigation is definitely a divine assist. So, when New China was founded, do you think the founding leaders would fully inherit the Kuomintang government's treaty with the United States in order to gain international recognition from the United States and respect U.S. interests in China so that U.S. capital would continue to suck the blood of the Chinese people? Of course I can't agree. Comrade Mao Zedong declared that the Chinese people have stood up. This represents a kind of fearless determination and courage. We are going to abolish the special interests of the great powers in China, and we are not going to let you continue to suck the blood of the Chinese nation. Even if you block and suppress us, we must be self-reliant and tighten our belts to stand up. Well, now there are a group of people in the United States who hope to make China fully surrender through trade wars and political blackmail in other areas to maximize U.S. interests. Do you think we will agree? Only by not forgetting your original intention can you achieve success. What was our industrialization path like at the beginning of the founding of the People's Republic of China? Here we cannot help but admire the broad-mindedness and layout of the founding leaders of the Communist Party of China, because only with a broad mind and a big layout can China's industrialization path be put on the right path. What is the correct path to industrialization? It's very simple: focus on heavy industry first and then light industry, put foundation first and then development. This is a path that is difficult first and then easy, with predecessors planting trees and others enjoying the shade, flowers planted in the first 30 years, and fruits in the next 30 years. It is difficult to achieve without a big mind and a strong spirit of historical mission. Let's talk about it briefly. There are 2 ways to get started with industrialization. One is to enter from light industry. This way is very easy, including the textile industry and daily necessities. It is easy to achieve results in the early stage, the investment is not large, but the rural labor force can be quickly transferred to solve a large number of employment problems. Providing the market with abundant daily necessities can quickly generate industrial output value. In a nutshell, it can quickly achieve political achievements. After World War II, most underdeveloped countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America followed this path. However, this road leads to a dead end. Without the basic support of heavy industry plus chemical industry, it will be difficult for you to achieve industrial upgrading step by step, and you will always stay in the stage of primary light industrial products. The second way is to focus on heavy industry first and then light industry. This road is extremely difficult, because the heavy industry investment cycle is long, and not only does it require sustained high accumulation of investment for a long time, but the citizens are not able to directly share the fruits of industrialization, typically laying the foundation and making contributions to future generations. But our founding leaders chose just such a path. Since we are following this path, it is inevitable to implement a planned economy in the early stage. There is no way. The output of agricultural society is limited. Even if we get rid of the rentier class and implement a high accumulation model, the first pot of gold raised will be very limited. There is no chance of success if the state wills to concentrate resources on heavy industry plus chemical industry. If a market economy is implemented at the beginning of the founding of the People's Republic of China, limited resources like pepper noodles will bloom everywhere, which will be a dead end for countries in Asia and Africa. Why are the heavy industry, mainly steel making, and the chemical industry, mainly 3 acids and 1 alkali, the cornerstone of the industrial system? Only the development of heavy industry based on steel making will drive the metal processing industry chain. Only the development of the chemical industry based on 3 acids and 1 alkali will drive the refining, chemical materials and other industrial chains. With these 2 industrial chains, you will have the confidence to engage in any manufacturing industry. More importantly, there is a foundation for upgrading the manufacturing industry. For example, our daily necessities, which of them can be separated from metal accessories plus chemical materials? Even in the textile industry, if there is no chemical industry as the basis, the dye industry cannot be developed, and you have to endure the exploitation of others. The textile industry of a handful of Southeast Asian countries has been rubbed on the ground by our Jiangsu and Zhejiang dye companies. This is not only true for daily necessities, but also has the confidence to engage in independent national defense and military industries. For example, The most advanced modern stealth fighters have built-in magazines inside the fuselage. Digging out a piece at the core of the fuselage will have a huge impact on the structure of the fuselage. Therefore, the main load-bearing structural parts of modern fighter jets are titanium alloy segments, and these titanium alloy segments must be processed with a 10,000-ton die forging press. At present, only 4 countries in the world have large-scale die forging presses of more than 40,000 tons: China, the United States, Russia, and France. Other countries just can't make it. Do you know when China's first 10,000-ton hydraulic press was put into use? 1962. The project was initiated in 1958 and completed in 1962. This is the kind of foundation the Mao era laid for us. The history of China's industrialization in the first 30 years will not be elaborated here. Interested students can read the first and second parts of my historical article, The March of Suffering. Now let's talk about how China promoted the path of industrialization after reform. From 1978 to the early 1990s, we mainly did 2 things at this stage. The first is the transformation of the economic system, from a tightly organized planned economy to a more dynamic market economy. Once the foundation is laid, it will naturally be liberalized to activate the potential of the private sector. The second is to desperately attract investment, to attract funds to improve our industrial system. In the first 30 years, we were building shelves, but now we are starting to fill in the muscles. At this stage, there are 3 main funds that give us a lot of help: Hong Kong capital, Taiwanese capital, and Japanese capital. As of 2015, Hong Kong investment in the mainland has reached 4.7 trillion. It is estimated that there were hundreds of billions in the dozen years before reform and opening up. Taiwanese investment in the mainland by 2017 has reached 1.4 trillion, and it is estimated that it will also be 200 to 300 billion at this stage. In addition, its Japanese capital, actually in the nature of war reparations compensation, more than 200 billion including free aid, subsidized interest, and interest loans. These funds have helped us tremendously. The charge began in 1992, and then our industrial development skyrocketed. Here is a picture for you to intuitively feel. India is also a developing country, founded around the same time, with a better foundation at the beginning of its founding, and a more favorable international environment. Due to taking different industrialization paths, compared with our GDP after 1992. China and India GDP trend chart. How did we take the road of industrialization after 1992? It's a very simple 12 words: the government sets up the stage, the enterprises perform, and the dual core drive. How can the government set up a stage? We will work hard to build infrastructure and cultivate the domestic consumer market, including the construction of railways, highways, expressways, and airports, China's characteristic iron official aircraft, the automobile consumer market, and the logistics industry have been cultivated. Including the construction of the state grid, 1.3 billion citizens were fully electrified in 2015, the only one in the world, and the household appliance market was cultivated. Take air conditioners as an example. In 2000, China's annual sales of air conditioners were only 10 million units, and now it is 100 million units. It has grown 10 times in a few years, and now our air conditioning penetration rate reaches 60%, which is equivalent to that of the United States. Including the laying of fiber optic cables, the PC and network markets have been cultivated. Including the construction of 4G base station smartphones, and the digital economy market will be cultivated. Our achievements in rail, government, and aircraft infrastructure in 30 years have exceeded what Western developed countries have achieved in 300 years combined. State Grid is currently the second largest star company in the Fortune 500. It has also spawned monopoly high technologies such as UHV. There are a total of 5 million 4G base stations in the world. There are 3 million in China, ranking first in the world in fiber optic cable penetration. Proportion of households with fiber optic cable access by country. The government has worked hard to build such a grand stage, coupled with various fiscal and taxation policy support, financial policy support, industrial policy support, and even our national leaders personally help companies run business. Foreign affairs visits bring a large number of Chinese votes. Entrepreneurs go out and help market. Only then did Chinese enterprises rise strongly. In just a dozen years, more than 120 of the world's top 500 Chinese enterprises were listed. Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, ZTE, Gree, Haier. Do you think it was Dong Mingzi who created Gree? Jack Ma created Alibaba? Ranjan Fei created Huawei? Without the stage that the government has desperately built, where would these corporate stars have the opportunity to perform? The baton of China's industrial road has always been in the hands of the ruling party. The Chinese government not only set the stage, but also designed a characteristic market economy driven by dual core. This dual core is state-owned enterprises plus private enterprises. In the price of foreign-funded gas stations is lower. You are excited again. I talked about the role of state-owned enterprises in public goods. Next, I will talk about the concept of a national game of chess. Tell me a case. If you buy a 40-inch LCD TV now, it will cost more than 1,000 yuan. If you go back 10 years, in 2007, do you know how much it would cost to buy a 40-inch LCD TV? 10,000 yuan. Why is there such a big price gap between the same industrial products over the past 10 years? Because in the past, this LCD panel was monopolized by foreign companies. They dared to sell us an LCD panel that only costs a few hundred yuan for several thousand yuan. Then the country asked BO, the leading state-owned enterprise, to engage in technical research on this panel. BO has been losing money for 10 years. The country has invested 200 billion, and finally we can produce our own LCD panels. Then panel prices dropped like an avalanche. BO actually lost money most of the time after it launched the panel, and was scolded by some people, such as cheating on state subsidies, wasting taxpayers' money, etc. But management doesn't see it that way. Our management department has calculated an account. For every 1 yuan lost by domestic panel companies led by BO, the value brought is a 20 yuan reduction in the cost of our domestic LCD TVs. Why can you buy an LCD TV for more than 1,000 yuan instead of 10,000 yuan? Just because there are such a group of state-owned enterprises making silent contributions behind the scenes. Chinese people consume 50 million LCD TVs every year, which alone saves Chinese people 400 billion yuan. Therefore, BO's losses of hundreds of millions or even billions every year are nothing. Even if the initial investment of 200 billion is taken into account, the money that Chinese people save on LCD TVs every year will come back in half a year. What kind of national game of chess? This is. Why are our state-owned enterprises inefficient? An important reason is that state-owned enterprises do dirty, hard, and tiring work that private enterprises are unwilling to do. Why can our economy maintain rapid growth for decades without experiencing a major recession cycle? One reason that cannot be ignored is that our state-owned enterprises must obey the overall situation of a national game of chess and expand counter-cyclically during the economic downturn. Why is our internet economy the best in the world? In addition to the high penetration rate of optical fiber and 4G base station infrastructure, the other three major operators are all state-owned enterprises. If the management wants to increase speeds and reduce prices, they have to obey orders and follow orders. In key areas of the national economy and people's livelihood, state-owned enterprises are the anchor of our characteristic market economy. Average internet speed of Chinese users over the years. Changes in mobile user tariffs in my country over the years. Please note that the above data are average data across the country, including rural areas, which is a very remarkable achievement. Now the US imperialists are desperately attacking our state-owned enterprises, and there are people in the country who are rushing to criticize the state-owned enterprises every day. There is echo from both inside and outside, and the cooperation is very tacit, but their efforts are destined to be in vain. Our characteristic market economy walks on two legs, state-owned enterprises and private enterprises, neither can survive without one. The ruling party has never wavered on this dual-core drive model. So, here comes the question. Where does the money come from as the Chinese government is desperately engaged in infrastructure construction? Its achievements in 20 years exceed those of Western developed countries in 300 years combined. It is still a Chinese characteristic. Through the development of real estate, the government's land sales revenue is used as the start-up capital for infrastructure projects, usually about 30%, and banks provide 70% of the matching loans. There is a group of experts who accuse the government of overissuance of currency every day, saying that our overissuance of currency is several times that of the United States. Well, the data is correct. But let me tell you, the overissuance of currency that the experts accuse is through the 70% of bank loans are spent on infrastructure. These experts are probably blind. They think that infrastructure projects fall from the sky. whether it is railways, public transportation, aircraft, power grids, optical fiber, base stations, or urban underground pipe network, these are all money. Why is our currency issuance several times that of the United States? The reason is very simple. The infrastructure projects we do every year are dozens of times that of the United States. Without these infrastructure projects, there would be no stage for our enterprises to perform. What is the industrial development path with Chinese characteristics in the past 20 years? This is the path. Real estate development rightward arrow, income from land sales plus financial loans to pay for infrastructure construction rightward arrow, cultivate a huge consumer market rightward arrow, promote the prosperity of domestic industries rightward arrow, cultivate world-class enterprises to participate in international competition. In the last video, China's power generation has skyrocketed after the 21st century. This is of course due to joining the WTO, which is a vivid reflection of the results of our 50 years of industrialization. Well, some public officials claim that it was because of the generous permission of the United States that China joined the WTO. Recently, the US imperialists also brazenly boasted that the United States rebuilt China by allowing China to join the WTO. Nowadays, people brag every day about how good the United States was to China in the past. This kind of ignorant remarks confuses many people. I will write an article to tell everyone the truth sometime. This view almost made me laugh out loud. I can say something responsibly. If the current group of US politicians were allowed to travel back in time to 2001, after foreseeing today's results, they would also nod to let China join the WTO. Why? Because American capital covets the Chinese market? Well, the Chinese government is trying its best to build a platform to cultivate a huge consumer market. Because of its accession to the WTO, the Chinese market has also been opened wider to the outside world. American capital has made a fortune in China because of this. Including our high-quality financial institutions listed overseas at low prices, including Merrill Lynch and Goldman Sachs. This US financial capital has made a huge profit of $100 billion in a few years by buying the stocks of China Construction Bank and Bank of China. This is nothing. US products including Apple and General Motors, Ford, McDonald's, KFC, Starbucks, Procter & Gamble, etc., sell more than $500 billion in China every year. US agricultural products, chips, cultural products, service trade and other products export to China every year $130 billion, and the total of the two exceeds $650 billion. This figure is more than 10 times that before China's accession to the WTO. The annual net profit of US capital in China exceeds $300 billion. Is American capital willing to give up such a big cake? Therefore, when the United States allowed China to join the WTO, it was the result of strong promotion by American capital and a win-win choice for both China and the United States. You see, as long as we are on the right path, even the US imperialists cannot stop us. To summarize the industrialization path of New China. 1949 to 1978. Reconstruct China's social structure and build a heavy industry based on steel making plus a chemical industry based on 3 acids and 1 alkali. Source of funds: get rid of the rentier class in agricultural society and implement a high accumulation model. This is the stage of laying the foundation and building the framework. 1978 to 1992. Transformation from planned economy to market economy. Based on heavy industry plus chemical industry, we began to develop our manufacturing industry. Source of funds: investment promotion. 1992 to 2016. The government sets the stage and enterprises sing the show. Dual core drive, state-owned enterprises plus private enterprises. The characteristic industrial road drives the industry to upgrade step by step. Source of funds: income from land sales plus financial loans. After 2016. Made in China 2025. Use a set of combined punches to attack the last fortress of high-end industries in developed countries, including financial policy, fiscal and taxation policy, industrial policy, comprehensive allocation of education and scientific research resources, etc. Source of funds: government funds plus private investment plus capital market. China is a professional athlete in overtaking industrial corners. China is the crusher of developed countries. There is no fortress that we cannot conquer. Because we have always been on the right path and never wavered.